I've been enjoying reading from my own book, The Super Couple: A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. For those of you for whom this is your first video, just want to remind you that this is a book I wrote by interviewing extremely happily married couples. I set out to discover if there was a formula or if it was accidental, and it was in fact a formula. The formula is in this book. In today's part, I am reading about the sixth of the six faulty assumptions of what I thought really made a super couple. I was wrong. This one will help explain a little bit better one of the things that most everyone comes to me and says, this is the problem for my marriage. And you're going to be surprised as well. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really, really, really does help. And this is my ministry. I'm trying to save 1 million marriages before I die. If you feel compelled to help, please click in the link below and send a few dollars through my buy me a coffee link. All right. So faulty assumption number 6, they were more alike than different. When I set out to discover the super couple formula years ago, and while my marriage was still deeply troubled, I thought there had to be something more specific and identifiable in the personalities of these individuals. They just had to be more alike than different, right? Most specifically, I felt that they had to have the same or similar temperaments. I mean, when these couples got lucky in love, it must have been because they did a better job of choosing mates, whose personalities were more in sync with or similar to their own. For instance, clearly super couples must either both be extroverts or both be introverts in order to be extremely happy, right? Well, now to be clear, I knew numerous couples who had had long-term marriages, and one was an extrovert and the other was an introvert. That wasn't my concern. Those marriages were just average marriages based on my perception. They just didn't stand out in the crowd as do super couples. They were likely content or even happy, but clearly they were not extremely happy. Remember, these were my perceptions, but not necessarily accurate or true. I wanted to be super, and since I felt that because my husband and I were opposites, one an extrovert, one an introvert, that super simply would yet again never be possible for us. As such, for many years, I had wished my husband was an extrovert like me. That way we'd actually have some fun together, doing the same activities. But no, my husband had to be a boring introvert who only enjoyed doing things alone, like working on cars or gardening, or worse yet, hunting. Why couldn't he be fun spouse like me, who enjoyed parties, amusement parks, dancing, and any other activity that involved 50 or more of our closest friends? I mean, why did he have to be so rude around other people and not be the life of the party like me? Okay, look, I truly was ignorant of relationships to a greater degree earlier in my marriage than one expects to be in her youth. Most all of us are ignorant. And though, as I've already stated, I'm not proud of my previous ignorance and resultant perspective towards my husband, I am also quite cognizant of the fact that I'm not alone and that many of you might also share similar perspectives, that people have to be the same or similar in their love languages, the same or similar in their likes and dislikes, the same or similar in their temperaments and personalities in order to have happy, long-term, and thriving marriages. I know this because over the years, I've been asked at least 1,000 times by couples they married the wrong person because their personalities or love languages were so radically different. After I delivered a temperament seminar many years ago, an adult male in his 30s, married for over 10 years at this point, mind you, came to me with the printout of his personality type, as well as the printout of his wife's, and said, should we be together or divorced? And he was serious. My prior ignorance was vindicated. Just this week, a woman and a very close friend to me articulated these very same errant sentiments as she and her husband began a period of marital separation. A second woman who is sadly filing for divorce said to me, her husband is unwilling to work at the marriage because he believes we are simply too different and therefore not meant for one another. One of these women was in her 20s and the other in her late 40s. It seems this errant assumption is not mine alone, but deeply embedded into our collective cultural psyches. I was greatly saddened by both these women's statements because they are absolutely untrue as the source of their marital demises. I also now know that being different or even on completely opposite ends of the personality spectrum are not only not the source of marital dissatisfaction, but rather the converse is true. Super couples are actually more different than alike in many of these areas. Most of our likes and dislikes, hobbies, and professions are chosen because we fit well with our personalities. Thus, when most couples assert that they are too different to be happy, they are often referring primarily to their differences in introversion or extroversion, because these differences greatly direct our preferences for particular hobbies, careers, and social environments. As such, a focus on extroversion and introversion will help us to understand other differences couples experience while striving for marital happiness. Both of the women above, the ones that I just exemplified, who stated that they were so different from their spouses, I know to be strong introverts. Their husbands are both extroverts. I get this. It's the same world in which I've been living for more than 4 decades at this point. It's just reversed. For the past decades, I have been enamored with temperament theory. Temperament theory goes all the way back to approximately 450 BC, when Hippocrates determined that there were 4 basic temperaments. That is, of all people ever born in any nation and from any period of history, that all people in the world would fall into one of 4 basic temperaments based on their first and foremost natural way of responding to the world. For example, most of us are right-handed, though some of us, like me, are left-handed. Neither is right nor wrong, good nor bad. It's just that one hand is more comfortable or preferred by its user than the other. It's the same with our preferences for extroverting or introverting ourselves as well. There's nothing wrong with either. We simply all have a preference for one or the other. Additionally, while there are numerous temperament models in existence today, think of the Kiersey-Bates, DISC, 4 lenses, Myers-Briggs, that's the one I prefer. Nearly all of them break human personalities into 4 different groups. Now, while the focus on this book that I'm reading to you is not on personalities, I do recommend everyone seek to learn basic temperament theory, since understanding personality differences is beneficial to the argument of marital superness. Too many people like me have, in times of marital trouble, defaulted to the erroneous belief that only certain personality types are meant to be together or can ever make it to super. If you're interested in learning more about temperament, there are literally hundreds of books available to help you understand yourself and your mate better. It helps you to cut the mental slack, as I always say. As a matter of fact, if your relationship is struggling, it might be precisely because one of you is ignorant of human behaviors and personalities. Become an expert in your mate, and happiness will follow. Now, the MBTI model explains personality differences through what we say 4 different dichotomies. Each dichotomy represents a different aspect of our personality. Extroversion versus introversion, so one end to the other. It seeks to explain from where we get our energy. Sensing versus intuition seeks to explain how we take in information. Thinking versus feeling seeks to explain how we prefer to make decisions. And judging versus perceiving seeks to explain our outer world orientation. Do we prefer more closure or more options, for instance? Based on these 4 dichotomies, MBTI mathematically breaks personalities into 16 different types. I'm an ESFJ, by the way, the hosts and hostesses of the world. And as stated earlier, the focus here will be on only one dichotomy, extroversion versus introversion. Not only is this the most easily understood of the 4, but it's also the most often discussed in terms of a couple's initial attraction to one another, their subsequent long-term relationship, and most importantly, often the most problematic in terms of presenting problems in the marital relationship. Okay, so I'm an off-the-charts extrovert. My husband, because God clearly has a sense of humor, is an off-the-charts introvert. Okay. Unlike what most commonly believe, this dichotomy is not about being shy or outgoing, though there are correlations between the two, but rather it explains from where we get our energy. Let me begin with extroverts, because that's what I am. Extroverts get their actual physiological energy from the outer world, from people, places, events. As such, we gain energy by going to malls, parties, sporting events where many other people are. We prefer running clubs and working out in group classes because the energy alone is enough to motivate us further than when we work out alone. We choose for hobbies, activities that keep us around groups of people, like book clubs, drama clubs, knitting clubs, etc. Depending on the degree of extroversion, we might nearly always choose the group setting for our activities and employment over the individual or private setting. Over my lifetime, I realized that I was always happiest when I worked at the busy, people-filled main offices in the biggest parts of the city. Working in the small satellite offices simply bored me as I didn't have enough daily interaction with my energy source, people. Don't get me wrong, I loved my cubicle and my cave time. I still do. I just need significantly less of it than do my introverted colleagues. As such, I'd often take a break from my cave time to go gain a little energy extroverting with a colleague. Then, when my energy tank was filled, I'd get back to work and with renewed energy and work twice as fast with twice the focus than before I extroverted myself. Off the book, you ever wonder why there's some people that are always at your cubicle and some people never leave their cubicles? You're looking at EI. As an extrovert, I've taught seminars to groups as small as 5 people, and while I'm certain I'm still brilliant in my delivery, I'm much less energized than when I teach seminars to audiences of 5,500 or even thousands of people. When I finish those seminars, I have so much resultant energy, I can go for a 10-mile jog afterwards, can clean my entire house like a maid on steroids, and can talk at the pace of a keyboard gone mad for the next hour or so, or until my energy source is removed for a sufficient period of time. When a strong extrovert is around a large group of people, it's as if they've been plugged into an electrical outlet and can keep on moving until their energy source is removed, such as once they are alone or in a small group for an extended period of time. Side note, if you want your extroverted children to go to sleep quickly, separate them from the others and give them alone time. Soon that child will be yawning and found asleep with an open book resting near her fingertips. Take the phone away too. Put this child in a room with siblings and it will be like an endless number of "quiet down in there" shouts that are going to be necessary to get the talking and giggling to cease and desist. Additionally, people who prefer extroversion tend to extrovert, that's the verb, their thoughts through either the spoken or the written word. We extroverts must speak to think. My poor husband, I know. Please send your contributions to the Danny Bacon Earplug Fund for Sanity. So when there exists an issue or a concern, an extrovert will be the first one to begin talking about it. Talking things out even when there's no issue, but rather just thoughts on an interesting topic, helps extroverts to process their thoughts and feelings. After going on and on about a certain topic, my husband will often say, "What on earth are you trying to say?" To which I respond, "I don't know yet. Disregard 75% of it. When I'm done, I'll know." I'm going to wait so you can laugh, because that's true. It's probably in your relationship as well. All you extroverts are now saying, "Amen, sister," right? And you're high-fiving each other. That's what I've been doing all these years. I never realized it. See, for extroverts, talking is the filter through which we parse our thoughts, which is why many extroverts have foot and mouth disease, like me. I have a size 9.5 mouth. Yeah, to prove it. Now, introverts, like my husband, are just the opposite. Introverts get their energy from the inner world of thoughts, ideas, concepts. Those who prefer introversion are energized by their internal world, where they have the time and space to think about all these issues and topics, the ones that are important or intriguing to them, without the loud outer world. The very things that tend to energize an extrovert will just as often drain the introvert, and vice versa. Introverts tend to work out on their own. They're the ones in the gym with the headphones on and ward off any potential talkers. They prefer hobbies that allow them to introvert, such as gardening, reading, alone, writing, alone, painting, alone, etc. Actually, introverts and extroverts can share many of the same interests. It's just that for extroverts, the word club will often follow. Gardening club, reading club, running club. And unlike extroverts, introverts often choose careers that will also satisfy their preference for staying in their inner world as much as possible. Unlike me, my husband totally prefers and thrives in the small satellite offices, tucked far away from human civilization. While he's awesome and excels no matter where he is, when he works in small, intimate settings, he thrives. This is in part the reason he also switched careers midlife to the environmental field, where he is daily required to go alone into the field for hours at a time. He drives alone. He walks to the particular field or forest alone, and he writes his permits alone. He loves it. The quiet setting energizes him and brings him great joy. However, when it comes to communication, the preference for introversion or extroversion has little relationship at all to the quality of one's communication or relational skills, but only the location of the communication exchanges. The primary difference is related to where the processing takes place, inside or outside of one's head. I point this out because I've regularly learned or heard others associate good public speaking skills to extroversion, as if only extroverts can be great public speakers. This is absolutely untrue. The primary difference is that after the introvert delivers her brilliant seminar, she's drained and needs to go to her cave or private space to recharge. The energy source or electrical outlet for the introvert is in the quiet, private space of her mind, uninterrupted by the outer world. For the time that she has been extroverting publicly, that introvert has been spending her energy and will ultimately feel drained. When a strong introvert with high quality communication skills does speak, however, what usually comes out are extremely thoughtful and powerful words. Few, but powerful, because they've been thoroughly parsed in the mind before exiting the lips. Thoroughly. For hours, or days, or weeks. Some introverts are extremely content never extroverting a particular thought or situation, as after he or she has processed it internally, it's finished. It's resolved, completed, for him or her at least. Now, paradoxical to the extrovert, when there is an issue, a concern, or an intrigue, the introvert tends to prefer processing those thoughts internally before ever uttering the first word. More so, unless required to do so based on a given situation or the needs of the other, those with a strong preference for introversion will often simply come to the conclusions about issues or concerns without ever having externalized their thoughts once. And they move on. Their preference for introverting is often so strong that they clearly envision themselves talking to their mates or with whomever they have the issue, and even envision themselves discussing the solution with the other person without ever having uttered a word. I've seen this get a lot of introverts in trouble in their marriages. Introvert: I already discussed the situation with you. Why can't you let it go? Extrovert: no, you didn't. You haven't said a word to me about it since I brought it to your attention. Introvert: I could have sworn we talked about it. Extrovert: where? When? Introvert: well, I was pretty sure we did. Having given this example in hundreds of seminars, it usually garners a lot of chuckling and elbow hitting from my introvert-extrovert couples who look at each other and nod approvingly in admission that this scenario has often played out in their own relationships. It's always comical when discussed, but the truth of the matter is that knowledge is power. Once made aware of these tendencies, people can work with them and seek to improve in these areas. To reiterate, unlike extroverts who speak to think, introverts think to speak. Or speak as infrequently as possible, depending on the preferred degree of introversion. When these two get married, that's when the real fun begins. Speaking and thinking isn't the only area problematic differences manifest in these mixed marriages. As mentioned earlier, the areas couples will most readily notice having clear manifestations of their differing temperaments is in their choices of hobbies, careers, or in the preference to reason through conflict externally, though either the written or the spoken word through, or internally through their thoughts. However, there is another issue that is often judged even more problematic when an introvert marries an extrovert. Often I've had a spouse come to me and to help resolve for them the recurring issue of privacy. After years of answering the same question, it now makes me internally smile each time the question is posed, because I know that both spouses are standing there privately poised to hear my response, as if in hopes of them turning to their spouse to say, "See, I told you I was right." Recently, one of my absolutely favorite super couples, because their communication seemed so in sync with one another, approached me with this question. "Christine, several times when Jenny and I have had a discussion on a particular topic, we will differ on whether or not this is a private conversation. One of us will often share parts of the conversation with others, while the other considers it private." Ah, spoken in true super couple fashion. The spouse posing the question, in this case Pete, would not reveal who held which opinion in order to protect the person should I have considered his or her opinion flawed. He didn't want Jenny to be hurt or even to be made to feel bad if I had chosen his side. That was very kind, but it didn't matter though. I knew exactly who did what because I knew that Jenny was, like me, an off-the-charts extrovert while Pete was an introvert. I told him that simply privacy was little more than an extrovert-introvert issue. To greater or lesser degree, extroverts are publicly open, while introverts are publicly guarded. As such, there's significantly less that extroverts consider private or off limits. There's very little I consider private, as you can tell by my 13 million videos and my exposed secrets in this book. Most topics can be shared with at least one other close friend. Now, introverts are significantly more guarded in their communications and consider many more of their human experiences private than do their extroverted friends or spouses. Facebook or social media is a good example of our differing needs for privacy. I believe the last time I looked, I had more than 1,000 friends. My thoughts are that I don't have much information on my page that I consider secret, so what could it hurt to let them see the pictures of my perfect grandchildren or the post of my having done a mud run in North Carolina, for instance? Now, my sister's a strong introvert. She has very few Facebook friends. This is not because she's not a likable person, because she's very well liked. But I recall an example she shared with me one day that perfectly exemplifies this difference in privacy preferences. After dropping her kids off at school, she met a few other mothers in the parking lot for the first time. They had a pleasant conversation and went their separate ways. When she returned home, she noticed a Facebook friend request from one of the women she had just met. Her response to me was, "Why on earth would I want to friend this person? I barely know her. I don't want her looking at my pictures and knowing about my private life." Yep, that's a true introvert. There's nothing wrong with her preference for privacy. It's just simply different than mine. So while you can see it's no big deal to me that my sister and I tolerate different levels of privacy, it's often a source of great discomfort when these two are married to one another and one spouse shares information that the other spouse wishes to protect. I've joked with my husband, "Oh, honey, it's okay if I tell them you have blue eyes. They can pretty much figure that out by looking at you." To reiterate, being different from one spouse is not the cause of marital breakdown. It's how we handle those differences that strengthens or weakens a marriage. In a later chapter, we will address the true cause of marital erosion when it comes to appreciating or disparaging our differences. Let me bring up one more consideration regarding similarities and differences. Social scientists have identified the theory of matching, which for the most part says people are more likely to form successful relationships with and express liking for people whose level of physical attractiveness roughly equals their own. I want to point out that this theory focuses on physical similarities for the most part. Pretty people tend to marry pretty people. People who consider themselves average attractiveness tend to marry others who are averagely attractive. In addition to physical similarities, we marry others whose values are most similar to ours. People with conservative values tend to marry others with conservative values. Those with more liberal values marry others who too hold more liberal values. Atheists tend to marry other non-believers, Christians marry Christians, etc. No matter how much married couples might be struggling and focusing on their differences, their most deeply held values remain similar. However, temperament research shows that we are attracted and tend to marry those whose personality traits oppose ours, and vice versa, precisely because one prefers to talk more while other prefers to listen. This works out quite well in many relationships, especially in the initial stages when we're trying to get to know each other, as it's not usually what is said that hurts or helps relational communication, but rather how one says what he or she says that truly makes a difference. So while a misappropriation of the theory of matching love languages, temperaments, hobbies, etc., seems to poison the thoughts of many who believe super couples are super because they are more alike, when it comes to our personalities being different, it's not the cause of our troubles. When marriages are troubled, blame shifts to the negative differences rather than the positive differences. So rest assured that while nearly all couples are most similar in their deeply held values, that infrequently, if ever, change. Differences in personalities, however, are not the problematic culprits they are made out to be. So that's it. I went into this research with several assumptions of what it was that created or hindered superness, and none were accurate. They had little to do with what it was that these super couples truly did have that made their marriages super. Rather than continue on what does not make a super couple, we will next begin to focus on the things they actually do. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for listening to this Bacon Bit. Remember to like and subscribe. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.